Good day, and welcome to the Child Abuse Reporting Protocol Training for Employees and Volunteers of Rocky Mountain School District Number 6. My name is Steve Wire, and I'm here to guide you through the training today. Before we get started, I just want to express my gratitude for being able to serve families and students on the traditional unceded territory of the Ktunaxa and Secwepemc people. And I want to share my appreciation for the culture and contributions of all Indigenous peoples in Canada. So you are in the right place if you are volunteering or you are an employee and you're participating in the annual review of the Child Abuse Reporting Protocol Training. We're going to get right into it here. Essentially, there are two things to remember about the Child Abuse Reporting Protocol Training. I'll refer to it perhaps as CARP for short as we move through the presentation because we love acronyms in education. So Rocky Mountain School District has a child abuse reporting protocol for all employees, volunteers, and anybody who has a contract with the school district. And there are essentially two things to remember. If you take away two things, these two things, you'll be great. First one is, if you have reason to believe, and that is you're not certain, you have reason to believe that a child or youth is in immediate danger or has been the victim of abuse, you have to contact either the RCMP, the school district, or a Ministry of Children and Families protection worker. And depending upon the immediacy of the concern, that may change. So the first thing you have to remember is that you have a duty to report suspicions of abuse if you have reason to believe that they exist. The second thing to remember is that you can always get help. You can always talk to a principal. You can always talk to somebody's school district staff if you need to get clarification about your duty. And I can explain more about that later as we go through this. Again, it's in bold here on this slide. It is an offense not to report a child protection concern. That is true. However, there are many ways you can get help to ensure that none of us commit this offense. So the CARP training really stems from two particular pieces of documentation. The first is the Child, Family, and Community Services Act, which is legislation or law, and that's from 2002. And it essentially states that the well-being of children is paramount, especially for organizations such as school districts, and that we ought to protect students from the possibility and risk of abuse. And so the purpose of this training model is to provide awareness and understanding about what abuse looks like and what you have to do if you have reason to believe that it exists. There are some definitions that will help guide us through this presentation. The first is a definition of abuse. Child is anybody under the age of 19, and the duty is a legal duty. Reason to believe, of course I mentioned earlier, means that based on some good information that you have, you're not certain, but you have reason to believe that the child is at risk and requires protection. The duty to report, it includes a number of things, and I won't read through them all, but you can go back and review this slide, the next two slides if you like. But essentially, if the child is facing the risk of immediate harm by a parent or another adult, if the child has been neglected in any form, or if the child is facing emotional abuse based on a parent's conduct. If any of these things exist, of course, if there's immediate danger to a child, we call 911. But if any of the other things exist, it's our duty for the person who learns about this to contact a child protection social worker. Again, these are some further incidences that would constitute abuse. So these are two really important numbers, and you can gather these at schools or at other district offices around the school district. These are the two numbers that a person would call to exercise their duty to report. The first number is the Ministry of Children and Family Development, and that will get you directly to an intake worker who will put you in touch with a protection worker. The second is the Ktunaxa Kinbasket Child and Family Services. For any student who is of Indigenous ancestry, the call that a person would make would be to the Ktunaxa Kinbasket Child and Family Services. And you can find out whether a student is an Indigenous student by talking to the school office, and they will give you that information for the purposes of making this report. It is important to note that in Golden, the Ktunaxa Kinbasket Child and Family Services does not operate. So in Golden, there is only one number, and that's the Ministry of Children and Family Development. Again, I mentioned that the Act or the legislation states that Indigenous peoples should be involved in planning and protection of the children who are Indigenous, and that is why in at least Windermere Zone and Kimberley Zone, the call is made to Ktunaxa Kinbasket Child and Family Services. So in order to make a report, there are a couple of things you're going to do. You're going to complete a form that we have, which is called a report of suspected child abuse or neglect. Those can be picked up at any school office. You're going to report that concern by phone to a child protection social worker, either at the Ministry of Children and Family Development or Ktunaxa Kinbasket Child and Family Services. It's important that you notify the school principal of your report, and that you provide your completed report to the principal in a sealed envelope. And if you can sign your initials across the flap of that sealed envelope, that will ensure that the security of that envelope is maintained. And then it's really important, number 4, not to contact any other parties related to this disclosure. It is a confidential disclosure. Again, confidentiality. You have this disclosure, and you can share this information with the protection worker and the RCMP if that's the call that needs to be made. It's important that you do not share this information with anybody else. We store these reports securely, and we do not give permission to view these forms unless, of course, they are required in some type of legal proceeding. If you are a teacher, it is important to note number 3. It is not considered a contravention of the Code of Ethics to report suspected child abuse. In fact, the law supersedes those codes. There are 2 types of disclosures that somebody may be reporting to the ministry or to Ktunaxa Kinbasket Family and Child Services. The first is direct disclosure. This is where the evidence of abuse is plainly observable to you. This would be, perhaps pattern bruising, perhaps a student telling you directly that they have been the victim of abuse, or expressing to you that they have fear about their experience. Indirect disclosures are the kind of disclosures that really require an understanding of the student over time, because it's their behavioral changes. They don't tell you directly, but they communicate in other ways. It might be through their behavior, their emotions. It could be through their schoolwork that those concerns develop for the student, and that requires time and a change. We say a move from baseline behavior. So how were they normally before, and what are the changes that lead you to be concerned? Those people who are volunteering with students, it's likely that you will deal almost exclusively in direct disclosures, if you ever have one, because your relationship with the student is very discreet and of a very short time period. Teachers and other staff, for example, might be more likely to be involved in instances of indirect disclosures, where you have a relationship with the student over a longer period of time, and you get to know the student, have a better understanding of their experience. To respond to a disclosure, it's really important that you remain calm, take the time to breathe through it, set aside some time so that you can listen and be supportive. It's really important that you are documenting what the child is telling you. But in number 3, it's really important, and especially with younger children, that we shouldn't be asking questions that lead them into an answer that we're looking to get. So, a leading question, an example of what we don't want to do would be a type of question that says, well, didn't so-and-so do X? And it really provides the student with the information that you want, and all they have to do is say yes or no. What we really want them to do, we want to ask questions like, tell me what happened to you. Okay, tell me about your experience. And so they provide the details. rather than us provide the details and they simply confirm. That can often lead us into a situation where we get inaccurate information. It's really important that the student feels and understands that they are not the person to blame for this, that they haven't done anything wrong, and that we are going to do our very best to help them. Our job is to help them and help them feel better. It's really important, number 5, to be honest. You are going to be sharing this information with people who can help. You are not going to be keeping this secret, and so you can't promise that kind of secrecy to a child. It's really important, number 6, and this is the number 2 that I mentioned at the very beginning. There is always help available. So while it might not be appropriate to tell the principal exactly who the student is and what happened, you can always go to the principal and say, hey, Steve, a student told me this, and make it very hypothetical and high level. A student told me this. Do you think that this is my duty to report? Do you think I have a duty to report this to somebody? And the principal can help you with this, and you don't have to disclose really confidential information. You can just make it a hypothetical, and the principal can provide you guidance. They can provide you the form. They can provide you support in speaking to the child protection worker. However, in the end, the only person who can make that contact with the worker is the person who has received the disclosure. Sometimes the disclosure is actually not about the parent of a child. So sometimes the disclosure is about a volunteer, another volunteer, a contractor, or even an employee of the school district, a teacher, the principal, or even sometimes the superintendent of the school district. So if the disclosure is about a parent, of course, you would contact the child Ministry of Children and Families and Child Protection Worker. If the disclosure is about an employee, like a teacher at the school, you would contact the principal directly. The principal would take action. If it's about somebody else in the public, you could contact the principal, or we would contact the RCMP. If the disclosure is about the principal of a school, then you would immediately contact the superintendent of the school district. So when these disclosures are made about people who are not the parent, then we let the principal know, or in the case of the principal, we let the superintendent know, and we take action from there. So a bit of a summary. Remember, if a student is Indigenous, the call is to the Ktunaxa-Kinbasket Child Family Services. But if the student is not Indigenous, the call is to MCFD, or the Ministry of Children and Family Development. And again, this is if you have reason to believe that a child is at risk for abuse or neglect. And this means that you have, based on some good information, you have a reason to believe. You're not certain, but it's important. Remember, you must report to your principal or superintendent if it's a school district employee who is causing harm or the student is at risk from. There are a couple of important documents that are linked on our district website. The first is the BC Handbook for Action on Child Abuse and Neglect, and Reporting Suspected Child Abuse and Neglect form. These can also be gathered from the school offices, and the principal can help you get those documents. I want to thank you, and just before we sign off, especially volunteers, thank you for the contribution that you make to students in Rocky Mountain. Without volunteers, we would be unable to offer some of the opportunities that students get in our school district, and so we're certainly very grateful that you've chosen to volunteer, and I appreciate the time you've taken. After you complete this module, there is a form to fill out, which is just basically a demonstration of some basic high-level points from this presentation that will allow us to understand that you have a grasp on the duty to report as part of this protocol. When you've completed that, it will be received by your school, and the school will process and understand that you are somebody who, for this purposes of this school year, is able to volunteer with students in support of the school district activities. So thank you very much, and have a great day.